The battlefield was silent now, but silence did not mean peace. Smoke rose slowly from the broken houses. The ground was black with ash, and the air smelled of fire and sorrow. The war between humans and the alien race had left deep scars, and this ruined village was one of many. Commander Elias, a human soldier, walked carefully through the empty streets. His boots pressed against the dust, each step echoing in the strange quiet. He had seen war before. He had seen pain. But something about this place felt different. It was not just destruction. It was despair. The walls of the alien homes were cracked. Strange signs written on the stones told stories he could not read. But even without words, he could feel the suffering. Elias expected to find soldiers, perhaps even traps, but instead he found nothing. Only shadows, only silence. He almost believed the place was empty. Until he heard it, a soft sound, like a sob, carried on the wind. He followed it, his hand resting on his weapon, cautious yet curious. And then he saw her, a young alien girl, small, thin, with pale silver skin that shimmered under the weak sunlight. Her eyes were large, glowing faintly, and filled with fear. She was standing in the middle of a broken courtyard, her hands shaking, her body trembling. When she noticed him, she gasped and dropped to her knees instantly. The sound of her knees hitting the stone floor was sharp. She bent her head low, her arms pressed tightly to her chest. As if she expected punishment, Elias stopped in his tracks. He had seen enemy soldiers fight with rage, but he had never seen one fall to the ground like this. It was not respect. It was fear. "Don't kneel," he said quickly, his voice firm but gentle. "There's no need for that." The girl did not move. She remained on the ground, her body trembling, her head still bowed. He stepped closer, lowering his weapon so it would not frighten her. Still, she did not rise. Her breath came in quick gasps, her shoulders shaking as if she were trying not to cry. Elias felt something inside him shift. This was not an enemy. This was a child who had been broken long before he arrived. "Look at me," he said softly, but there was no response. Her silence was heavy. Pressing into his chest like a weight, he crouched down, his eyes level with her. Slowly, carefully, he reached out a hand. She flinched instantly, her whole body recoiling as if expecting a strike. His heart ached at the sight. "I won't hurt you," he whispered. "You don't have to kneel to me." Her glowing eyes lifted for the briefest moment. Meeting his in that single glance, Elias saw something that froze him. It was not just fear, it was sorrow. A sorrow so deep it seemed carved into her soul. He wanted to ask her why she would kneel before him, but he could already sense. The answer was not simple. This was more than fear of war, more than fear of humans. It was something older, something deeper. The wind carried the sound of falling debris, the ruins groaning under their own weight. But in that moment, the only sound Elias heard was her uneven breathing. He slowly lowered himself to sit across from her on the ground, showing he was no threat. "I am Elias," he said, pointing to himself human. He touched his chest and then looked at her. Waiting, the girl's lips trembled, but no words came. Instead, she lowered her head again, pressing her forehead to the ground as if begging for mercy. Elias clenched his fists, anger burning inside him, not at her, but at whoever had taught her this. This was not respect. This was chains hidden in the mind. The silence stretched on, heavy and sharp. The commander felt torn, part of him wanting to leave, part of him unable to walk away. There was something in her presence that demanded he stay. This girl's story was tied to the ashes of this place, and perhaps to the truth of the war itself. Finally, he stood again, his shadow falling over her small form. "I told you not to kneel," he said, his voice stronger now. "You are free to stand." But even as he spoke the words, he saw the truth in her eyes. She was not kneeling out of choice. She was kneeling because standing was impossible. Elias felt his chest tighten. This was not the meeting of enemies. This was the meeting of two broken worlds. And in this first meeting, he already knew her reason for kneeling would break his heart. The wind moved through the broken streets. Carrying the smell of smoke and burned stone, Elias stood there, watching the alien girl kneeling before him. And he felt a heaviness in his chest. He had told her not to kneel. He had spoken softly. Even lowered his weapon, but nothing changed. She remained pressed to the ground. Trembling like a bird with broken wings, he took a slow step closer, his boots crunching on the shattered stones. Her body stiffened instantly, every small movement showing her fear. Elias lowered himself again, crouching so he would not tower over her. "Please," he said gently. "Stand up. You are safe." Still, there was no answer. Not a word. Not even a sound, only her shallow breathing, quick and uneven. He studied her face carefully. Her silver skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Her large eyes lowered, refusing to meet his. She was silent. But her silence spoke louder than any scream. Elias slowly reached into his pack and pulled out a small container of water. He placed it carefully on the ground between them, and then moved his hand away. For a long moment, she did nothing. Then, with slow and shaky hands, she reached out, grabbed the container, and held it close. She did not drink it first. She simply stared at it, as if afraid it would be taken away. "You're thirsty," Elias said softly. "It's all right. It's yours." Finally, she lifted it to her lips and drank in small, careful sips. Her hands shook the whole time. But she did not spill a drop. When she finished, she placed the container back down, bowing her head again, as if even drinking was something she had to apologize for. Elise's jaw tightened. This was not how a child should live. He thought of his own people, his own home, where children laughed and played freely. The sight of this girl, silent and broken, twisted something inside him. "Do you understand me?" he asked, keeping his voice calm. The girl gave the smallest nod. Her forehead still pressed close to the ground. "So you can hear me, but you choose not to speak." Elias thought her silence was not from ignorance. It was from something else, something heavy. He tried again, pointing at himself. "Elias." Then he pointed to her, waiting. She stayed motionless, her lips pressed tightly shut. The only answer she gave was lowering herself even further, her hands gripping the dirt as if it was her only safety. Elias sighed and leaned back. He realized that speaking would not break her silence. Words were not enough. Because her silence was a wall built over years of fear. Somewhere in her past, speaking must have led to pain. And kneeling must have been the only way to survive. For a while, they sat in quiet. The ruined village groaned under the weight of destruction, the broken roofs creaking in the wind. Above them, the sky was heavy with clouds, dimming the light even further. Elias watched the girl, and she watched the ground. Both locked in their own thoughts. After some time, he tried something else. He placed a small ration of food in front of her, the same as before. He did not push it toward her, only set it down, and waited. Her hands shook again as she reached forward. Taking the food carefully, she ate slowly, every bite small, her eyes never lifting from the ground. It was then Elias noticed something strange. Each time she took food or water, she bowed afterward, pressing her head lower. It was as if she believed even survival was something she had to beg for. His heart ached with every movement she made. Finally, when she finished eating, he spoke again, his voice firmer this time. "You don't have to bow. You don't have to kneel. Not with me." For the first time, her eyes lifted toward him. Only for a brief second, and in that second, he saw it again, the deep sorrow, the fear, the pain of a life lived under chains. Then her gaze dropped, and she returned to silence. Elias leaned back against a broken wall. Frustration burning inside him. He wanted to help. But how could he fight against a prison that was inside her mind? He closed his eyes for a moment, thinking this silence was not weakness, it was survival. She had lived her whole life in fear, and silence was her only shield. When he opened his eyes again, he found her still kneeling, still quiet, but clutching the empty water container to her chest as if it were a treasure. Elias realized something important then. She had not spoken a single word, but she had already told him everything. Her silence was her story. Her bowed head was her truth. And though he did not yet know the reason, he felt it deep inside. Her silence was not just fear of him. It was fear of a world that had forced her to kneel long before he arrived. The night came slowly, wrapping the ruined village in shadows. Elias built a small fire in the broken courtyard, though the flames were weak. Struggling against the cold air, the alien girl sat nearby, still kneeling, her hands folded tightly. In her lap, her eyes fixed on the ground. She had not spoken a word since he found her, and every time he told her not to kneel. She returned to the same position, as if it was all she knew. Elias watched her carefully, his heart heavy with questions. Why did she kneel so quickly? Why did silence cling to her like chains? He had seen many alien soldiers, some strong, some proud, but never one like her. She was young, fragile, and yet something in her silence spoke of years of suffering. He decided to try again. He tossed a piece of bread toward her, letting it fall on the stone between them. Her hands moved instantly, quick and desperate. As if food was a gift she might lose at any moment. She picked it up, bowed her head, and ate in small bites, her glowing eyes still avoiding his. Why? Elias whispered to himself, staring into the flames. The fire crackled, the sound filling the silence that hung between them. After a while, he said aloud, "Do you always kneel? Is this what your people do?" The girl froze, her shoulders stiff, her body trembling slightly. Her silence was her answer. But it was not enough for Elias. He leaned forward, his voice low, almost sharp. "Who made you do this?" This time, something changed. The girl's lips parted, but no sound came. Only a faint tremble. Then, so softly it was almost a breath, a word slipped out. "Law," she whispered. Her voice broken, fragile, like a bird's wing snapping under. Wait. Elias's eyes widened. It was the first word she had spoken since he found her. "Law?" he repeated, leaning closer. "They made you kneel by law." Her head dipped lower, confirming without looking at him. Elias clenched his fists, anger burning deep inside. What kind of law forced a child to kneel, to bow as if she were nothing? He had seen harsh rules before, but this was cruelty turned. Into tradition, he pressed gently, careful not to frighten her again. "Tell me," he urged softly, "what happens if you don't kneel?" The girl's body shook, and for a moment he thought she would stay silent forever. Then she lifted her trembling hands, pulling at the collar of her worn clothes. Beneath the fabric, Elias saw them thin scars, long and deep, carved across her back. They were old, healed but permanent, the kind of scars left by whips, by punishments, by pain. Elias's breath caught, his chest heavy with fury and sorrow. His heart broke as he realized the truth. She had been punished for standing, punished for trying to live without kneeling. This was not obedience. This was survival. She was kneeling because not kneeling meant pain. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The fire cracked softly, the cold air wrapping around them. Elias stared at the scars, his throat dry, his hands shaking. The girl quickly pulled her clothes back together, hiding the marks as if ashamed. "You don't have to hide," Elias said, his voice thick. "It's not your shame, it's theirs." But she shook her head quickly, lowering herself again. Pressing her forehead to the stone floor, the sight tore at him. This was not just fear. This was a lifetime of being told she was less, that her only safety was submission. Elias leaned closer, his tone steady but filled with fire. "Listen to me," he said firmly. "That law is broken. It means nothing now. You don't have to follow it. Not with me." The girl's hands gripped the ground, her body shaking harder. Tears slid down, her cheeks silent and glowing in the firelight. But she did not rise. She could not. In her tears, Elias saw the truth. This was not a choice she could make easily. The law was not just written on her people's stones, was written in her mind. Burned into her body, to stand would mean to fight against everything she had ever been forced to believe. He sat back slowly, his anger turning into resolve. He could not change her world in one night. But he could be the first to show her another way if her chains were made of silence and fear. Then he would break them with patience and kindness. Elias looked at her one last time before resting his back against the ruined wall. The girl was still bowed, still trembling, still silent. But her single whispered word, law, echoed in his mind like a scream. And he knew then. Her reason for kneeling was not only fear, it was a lifetime of chains disguised as obedience and breaking. Those chains would be the hardest battle he had ever fought. The night passed slowly, and the fire burned low. Elias stayed awake, listening to the soft sounds of the ruined village, while the alien girl sat curled on the ground, still kneeling, still silent. He could not stop thinking about the scars she had shown him, about the single word she had whispered, law. That word carried with it centuries of pain, and her back carried the proof when dawn broke. Pale light spilled over the ruins, washing the broken stones in gray. Elias rose to his feet and stretched, his eyes falling on the girl again. She had not moved much through the night, her head still bowed, her hands folded tightly as if she was afraid to let them rest. It was as though she feared even sleep would be punished. He took a slow breath and decided it was time to try again. Kneeling in front of her, he spoke gently. "You don't need to kneel anymore. Not here, not with me." Her glowing eyes flickered upward for only a second before dropping again. She said nothing, but Elias noticed her lips tremble as if words wanted to escape but could not. "I want to understand," Elias said softly. "Why did they make you kneel? Tell me, please." At first, she stayed silent, her shoulders shaking. But then, slowly, her lips parted, and in a trembling voice, broken like glass, she began to speak. "When we are born, we are taught," she whispered, "taught to kneel before the strong, taught never to stand tall, never to look into their eyes." Elias listened closely, not daring to interrupt. Her voice was quiet, weak, but every word carried the weight of her life. "If we stand," she continued, "if we refuse, the whips come, the chains come, the darkness comes." Her fingers tightened against her knees. "When I was little, I stood once. I thought maybe I could be free. I thought maybe—" It was not true. Her voice cracked, and she shook harder. "They caught me. They tied me, and they broke my back until I could not move. They said a child who does not kneel is not a child, but a mistake." Elias's throat tightened, his hands curling into fists. The image of a young child punished for something as simple as standing was almost too much to bear. He wanted to rage, to curse, but he forced himself to stay calm. "For her sake," she continued, her voice shaking with every word. "My mother. She told me to kneel. She said if I knelt, I would live. If I knelt, they would not hurt me again." Her eyes filled with tears, but she kept speaking. "I wanted to believe her. I wanted to be safe. So I knelt, and I never stopped. Because every time I tried to stand, the pain came back." Tears slid down her silver cheeks. Glowing faintly in the morning light, Elias's heart ached, every word cutting deeper into him. This was not a soldier, not an enemy. This was a child stolen by cruelty, her childhood shattered under the weight of chains. He reached forward carefully, slowly, placing his hand on her shoulder. She flinched, but she did not pull away. "You don't have to kneel anymore," Elias whispered, his voice firm but kind. "You are free now. No one will hurt you here." The girl shook her head, her tears falling faster. "You don't understand," she whispered. "The law never ends, even if the people are gone. The law lives inside me. The chains live inside. Me, I cannot stop. I cannot stand." Her words hit Elias harder than any weapon ever had. He finally understood her prison was not only her people, it's not only their laws, it was inside her, carved into her heart, into her mind. She had grown up kneeling, and now it was the only way she knew how to live. For a long time, Elias sat in silence beside her, his hand still on her shoulder. He wanted to fix it, to take her pain away, but he knew it would not be easy. Healing scars carved so deep would take more than words, more than promises. "At last," he said quietly, "then I will stay. I will fight this law with you." One day at a time, the girl looked up at him, her eyes wide with confusion and disbelief. No one had ever spoken like that to her. No one had ever promised to fight for her. Her lips parted as if to speak again, but then closed quickly. Her silence returning, but in that silence, Elias saw something new. Not just fear, not just sorrow, a spark, small and fragile, but real a spark. Of hope. The girl bowed her head again, but her tears this time were different. They were not only tears of pain, but of something she could not name yet. Elias stayed beside her, his heart heavy but filled with resolve. He knew now her childhood had been broken, her life stolen by chains. But he also knew her story was not over, and he would not let her live the rest of it on her knees. Morning light spread across the ruins like a thin blanket, soft and cold. Elias prepared a small meal, warming the rations over the last coals of the fire. The alien girl watched with quiet eyes, still close to the ground, her hands folded against her chest. He remembered her words from the night, the law that lived inside her, the chains that no one could see. He knew a promise had to be more than a sentence. It had to be action, breath, and time. He placed the food near her and moved his hand away, slow and calm. She waited, then took it in small bites, bowing afterward as she always did. Elias breathed in and out, steady like a drum, and spoke in a voice that did not shake. "I will stay," he said, each word simple and strong. "I will stand with you." The wind moved the ash along the courtyard stones, and for a moment the village seemed to listen. He unfastened his field cloak and set it around her shoulders, a soft shield against the chill. She flinched at the first touch, then stilled as the warmth settled. Her gaze lifted a little, not to his eyes, but to the space between them, as if looking at the idea of safety. Elias took a piece of chalk from his kit and drew a circle on the stone around them, a white line broken only at one side. "This is our small world," he said, "inside this line. There is no kneeling." She stared at the circle, her breath catching like a bird in a net. Her fingers hovered over the chalk line. Afraid to cross it, Elias shifted to the open break of the circle and touched it with 2 fingers. "You choose," he said. "You can stay outside and kneel, or you can step through and sit." Not kneel, just sit. The choice lay on the ground like a key. Light and frightening. For a long time, she did not move. Her hands shook, her lips trembled. She bowed and lifted, bowed and lifted. Caught between habit and hope, Elias did not rush her. He only waited, still as a stone standing in a river. At last, she slid forward on her knees, reached the break in the circle, and stopped again. High shone with fear and something new. Thin as a thread, she placed one hand inside the circle, then pulled it back, then placed it again. A low sound left her throat. Not a word, not a sit. Cry, but the sound of a wall cracking. Elias set both palms on the ground and lowered his head to match her level. No punishment here, he said. No whip, no chain. The words were simple tools, building a bridge plank by plank. She inhaled, small and shaky, and slid through the break in the circle. Instead of kneeling, she folded her legs sideways and sat. Her back still bent, her head still low, but she sat. Elias let out a breath he did not know he was holding. A quiet victory that did not need a shout. He did not touch her. He did not lift her chin. He only mirrored her posture and sat too. Two shapes in the gray light, learning the same new rule. From the far end of the street, a piece of metal fell, the clatter thin and distant. Elias's eyes flicked to the alley, his soldier's mind measuring risk. He tapped his wrist unit and scanned for movement. The screen showed a flicker, then nothing. Maybe a drifting drone. Maybe ruins settling, maybe a patrol. He kept his voice calm. But the promise in his chest burned brighter. He took a strip of cloth from his kit and folded it into a narrow band. He set the band on the stone between them. This is a standing token, he said. When you feel brave, you hold it. You take one breath. And you choose to rise a little. Not all at once, just a little. Her fingers hovered as if the band were fire. Then she touched it, flinched, and touched it again. 3 truths, Elias said, counting on his fingers like a teacher. First, you are not a mistake. Second, you are not property. Third, you can refuse. Each truth felt like sunlight pressing through a cracked window. Her lips shaped a sound, then stopped, then tried again. Refuse. She whispered. The words small and rough, a new color in her voice. Elias nodded once, firm and proud. Yes, refuse, he said. Refuse the old law inside your head. She held the band tighter, as if it might run away. A cold gust crossed the courtyard, and ash swirled like gray snow. Elias stood slowly and stepped to the broken archway, eyes scanning the street. He returned and placed a small beacon near the circle, a cone of quiet light that marked their space. He was breaking protocol, and he knew it. But some rules must bend when a life must stand. That was the shape of his promise. Heavy and right, he sat again, closer now, still giving her room. Do you have a name? He asked gently. And then softened the ask into a choice. You can keep it, or tell it, or make a new one, or say nothing. She closed her eyes, and the smallest breath left her lips. After a long pause, she whispered a syllable, a soft sound like water over stone. Elias repeated it once, careful and respectful, and saw a flicker of warmth cross her face. Another clatter echoed down the lane, nearer than before. Fear moved through her body like a shadow, and she began to bend back toward the ground. Elias set his hand palm up on the stone, not touching her, only offering. Token, he said, reminding her of the band. Breath, then choice. She gripped the band, drew one shaky breath, and held herself from falling all the way. He leaned close, voice steady as iron. I promise, he said, I will not let them hurt you. I will not leave you. I will teach you to stand. The promise was not poetry. It was a plan. It was watchfulness. It was food and warmth and patient hours. It was the building of a road where there was only broken ground. The word settled in the air like a shelter. Her shoulders loosened. A tiny change, but a real one. She sat, not kneeling, inside the chalk circle, clutching the band and looking at him with a tired kind of hope. The distant sound faded. Or maybe it waited, hidden beyond the ruins. Elias adjusted his gear and lifted his chin. More guard than soldier now, more guardian than guard. 2 worlds had met in a war, But inside a white circle on black stone, a new law began, the law of his promise. And her slowly rising courage, one breath at a time. The morning stretched into afternoon, and the ruined village grew quiet again. Ash drifted like soft gray snow across the stones, and the air carried the faint echo of battles long finished. Inside the chalk circle Elias had drawn, the alien girl still sat, her small hands gripping the folded cloth band as though it was a lifeline. She was not kneeling anymore, not fully, she was sitting, bent low, but sitting. And that small difference felt like the first crack in a wall. Elias stayed close, careful not to push her too fast. Patience, he reminded himself. Patience builds trust, and trust builds strength. He sharpened his blade slowly on a stone, letting the sound of metal scraping fill the silence instead of questions. The girl's eyes lifted sometimes to watch, then fell again, as if she feared being caught looking too long. Hours passed, and Elias finally spoke. "You are strong already," he said quietly. "You survived what should have broken you. That means you can survive the rest." She clutched the cloth tighter, her lips pressing together. Her silence was still heavy, but something in her shoulders shifted, less collapsed. More steady, he stood and stretched, his tall frame casting a long shadow over the circle. Then he held out his hand, palm open. Not forcing, only offering. "Try with me," he said gently. "Not far, not fast, just try." The girl stared at the hand, her whole body trembling. Her breath came sharp, as if standing was more dangerous than fire or blades. For a long moment, she stayed frozen. Then, with a small sound, she placed her trembling hand in his. Her skin was cold against his warmth. Fragile like glass, but real, slowly, carefully. Elias pulled upward, not dragging her, only guiding. Her legs shook, her knees resisted, but the pull of his strength was steady and calm. She rose halfway, her back bent, her knees still bent, but she was rising. Every second she stayed up was a battle. Every second her breath caught in fear, but Elias did not let go. "You are safe," he said firmly. "No one will strike. No. One will chain," she gasped and nearly dropped, but he steadied her with both hands. Holding her upright for the first time, the girl stood, though weakly, inside the circle. Her eyes darted around as if punishment might fall from the sky. Her legs trembled under her small frame, yet she did not fall. Tears streamed down her silver cheeks. But this time, they were not only from pain. They were the tears of someone who had done something impossible. Elias crouched slightly, lowering himself so he would not tower over her. "Look," he said softly, "you're standing, and nothing happened. The law cannot touch you here." Her lips parted, a soft sob escaping. She leaned forward as if she might collapse again. But Elias's steady hand kept her balanced. They stayed like that for minutes, her body shaking but upright. When she finally dropped back down, it was not on her knees. Instead, she sank too. Sit again, still clutching the band tightly. Her chest rose and fell fast. Exhaustion written in every breath, but her eyes carried something new. "Fragile and glowing, you see," Elias said, his voice low, every step, every breath. "You break the old law." She looked at him, her eyes wide, wet with tears. Her lips moved, and one word came out. Soft but clear, "free." Elias felt his throat tighten. He nodded once, firmly, and said back, "Yes, free." That word alone was worth the whole day. It was more powerful than a weapon, more important than a battle won. The afternoon sun broke through the clouds for a moment, spilling gold across the ruins. It fell over her hair, over her pale skin, and made her look like something almost unreal. She blinked against the light, her hand still gripping his. For a moment, she was not a prisoner, not a child of chains. She was just a girl, standing beside someone who refused to let her fall. A sudden noise snapped through the silence, a crack of stone collapsing somewhere beyond the courtyard. The girl startled, her body folding as if to kneel again. But Elias caught her shoulders before she could drop, his voice sharp but calm. "No, not again. Stand with me." She froze, trembling, but obeyed the steady pressure of his grip. The sound faded, just rubble falling, no danger, still. She remained standing, clinging to him, her breath sharp but steady. Elias looked down at her, pride glowing in his chest. This was more than survival now. This was change, slow but real. Together they were building something no law could destroy. He tightened his hold gently, steady as stone. "Every time you choose to stand, you are stronger than before," he whispered. The girl's tears shone in the fading sun, but her chin lifted ever so slightly. Two figures stood in the ashes of war, one human, one alien. Not enemies, not strangers, but something new, a promise and a spark. Standing together and for the first time, Elias believed this was more than rescue. This was the beginning of freedom. Asterix night returned once more. Spreading its quiet blanket over the ruined village, the fire Elias had built glowed gently. Painting the stones with orange light, the alien girl sat across from him, no longer on her knees, but sitting with her legs folded. The cloth band still held tightly in her small hands. She had stood earlier, truly stood, and though it had shaken her to the core, she had done it. That small victory lingered in the air like a fragile song. Elias studied her carefully, his soldier's eyes softer now than they had ever been. He remembered her tears, the scars, the whispered word law. He remembered the way she clung to him when rubble fell, yet still chose not to kneel again. Something inside him knew there was more, something she had not yet said. Her silence still carried a weight that had not been lifted. He leaned forward, resting his arms on his knees. "You have shown me your fear," he said gently. "You have shown me your chains, but not your heart." Her glowing eyes flickered up, then down again. He continued, "Why do you still kneel? Not to them, not to the law anymore. But why to me?" The girl's hands tightened on the cloth band, her breath sharp and unsteady. For a long time she said nothing. Elias waited, patient as stone, his gaze steady but kind. Finally, her lips parted. And in a voice almost broken, she whispered, "Because I don't want you to leave." Elias's chest tightened, his breath catching in his throat. The words were simple, but they cut deeper than any blade. She was not kneeling out of obedience, not out of tradition, not only out of fear. She was kneeling because she believed kneeling was the only way to make someone stay. Tears spilled down her silver cheeks as she tried to explain. "When I was small," she said softly, "those who cared for me left, one by one, some taken. Some gone, some choosing to forget me." Her voice cracked, trembling with every word. "I thought, maybe if I kneel, if I beg, if I show I am nothing, then they will not go. They will keep me, even if only as a servant." She pressed her forehead to the ground, her whole body shaking. "So I kneel. Not for respect, not for law, but because I cannot lose again. I cannot lose you." Elias's heart broke at her confession. He felt the sharp pain of understanding, as if her sorrow had carved itself into his own chest. This was not about chains anymore, was about loneliness, abandonment, the desperate fear of being left behind. Her reason for kneeling was not only fear of punishment, but fear of being alone. Slowly, Elias moved closer and knelt beside her. He did not pull her up this time, not yet. Instead, he set his hand gently on her back, warm and steady. "I told you not to kneel," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Not because I am angry, but because you don't need to beg for me to stay." Her shoulders shook harder, her sobs quiet but endless. "You will leave," she whispered, Everyone leaves. Everyone always leaves. No, Elias said firmly. Not me. He lifted her chin carefully, not forcing. Just guiding her eyes to meet his. Her glowing gaze was filled with pain, but also the faint spark of hope that had begun days ago, as long as I live. Elias said, his voice steady, "You will never kneel before me, not for law, not for fear. Not to make me stay." He let out a slow breath, his promise heavy and true. "I will stay because I choose to, because you matter. Because you are more than what they told you." The girl's tears fell freely, but her lips trembled into the smallest shape of a smile. Fragile as morning light, she gripped the cloth band tighter and with all the strength she could find. Rose to her feet, her knees wobbled, her shoulders shook, but she stood, facing him. For the first time, she did not kneel, she did not bow. She stood tall. Even if only for a moment, Elias rose with her, side by side. Their shadows long against the firelight, the ruins of war surrounded them. But within the circle of light, something new was born. Not a soldier and an enemy child, not a master and a servant, but to survivors, bound not by chains, but by promise. The girl's voice came soft, almost breaking, but filled with something new. "You will not leave." She asked again, her last fear clinging to the air. Elias shook his head firmly. "Never," he said. "You are free, and you are not alone anymore." The night wind carried away the smoke, and the fire crackled with warmth. The girl lowered her head, but not in kneeling only to wipe her tears when she lifted her gaze again. She was standing, truly standing beside him, and for the first time in her life, she believed the words he spoke. Her reason for kneeling had broken his heart, but her reason for standing would heal it. Together, in the ashes of war, they began the first step toward a new world.